Welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast. My name is Courtney Lovely Evans, and I have the privilege of serving as the Director of Athletics at Palm Beach Atlantic University. I've had the opportunity to participate in several NCAA leadership development programs that I believe prepared me for the chair, the Dr. Charles Whitcomb Leadership Institute, and Achieving Communication Success. Both of those programs allowed me to meet several thought leaders in our industry, as well as me working on developing my personal leadership philosophy. As a leader, it's important for you to communicate your expectations to your staff. At Palm Beach Atlantic University, we are developing Christian game changers, and it is our desire to be the standard in Division II.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown, and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast, where we highlight executive and organizational leadership. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at 1Q Leadership. We are joined today by Danielle Harris. Danielle is the commissioner of the Wisconsin Intercollegiate Athletic Conference. Greetings, Danielle. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, ma'am. I'm glad to have you on. Now, you're in sports for almost 20 years, right?
Yep, that's correct.
And I guess in college athletics for roughly 16 of those years, maybe something along those lines, right? Yep. Spent a lot of time before going into the Wisconsin Intercollegiate Athletic Conference. You were at the Great Lakes Intercollegiate Athletic Conference, right?
That's
Spent
right.
some time there, right?
Yep.
2 years. 2 years is long enough to make an impact in terms of influence. Talk to us a little bit about listening and about being a leader and influencing people.
What I know is that if you lay the vision down, a lot of times when you go into these positions, you ask what the priorities are, right? And in this position, that person reports to a board.
Yeah.
And that board kind of lays the foundation as far as what the priorities are. So what I know is that the priorities need to be addressed first before you can get to some of those big picture or those visionary type things. You got to make sure your priorities and your needs are met first,
right,
and not your wants. So that's what I know for sure.
What you know for sure. I love that. But what I know about you is your brand of influence comes from listening to those you are influencing. Talk to us a little bit about the aspect of listening for effective communication and effective leadership.
Really being in the role as a commissioner is to help guide your institutions through this landscape of intercollegiate athletics that is consistently changing. And so one of the things that I like to do is to go on campus, really meet our student athletes where they are, meet our administrators, our coaches where they are, and just listen to the issues and the things that they care about the most on campus, as well as our faculty athletic reps and our chancellors and presidents. The reason why I value listening so much is because most of the time people just want to be heard, and you can learn a lot from their story. You can learn where to connect the dots, where to help them, where to help guide them, and where to kind of help facilitate where that institution, where that program should be going within the next chapter. So listening is a big thing for me. I'm a very observant person. I think that's also a very key leadership skill, is to be able to listen and observe and be able to connect the dots.
Right, which is important. Now, here's what I wonder. Let's say a student athlete or an athletic director, or even a president, talks about something, you couch it away, but in your mind, we are probably 4 years away from solving this issue that this person is talking about.
Happens a lot.
How do you handle that? Because that person wants to know. They probably are happy that you acknowledge that you hear them.
Mm-hmm.
But this problem is something that's a few years away. They probably aren't the only one who has this issue or has this concern.
It happens a lot. A part of going on that listening tour and meeting people where they are is sharing what your vision is for the conference. And when you share your vision, people will understand where you're leading them and what direction you want to go down. And I always tell people there's a method to my madness. We may not get to it in year one, but it's like a building block. We're going to build on it in year one, year two, and so on and so forth. So I think that if you share your vision, you let them know that you hear them, we're going to get to it, but here are where the priorities are first. And here is where we need to lay our foundation, and then we can get to some of those other things.
Tell me about some of the things. You've been in the in the chair, I guess commissioner's chair for a couple of years now, and people talk to you and you listen, and you're probably known as a listener and probably known as somebody with good perception about what's going on. What have you seen or heard that surprised you since you've been in the commissioner's chair?
You know, starting in the middle of COVID, I've kind of been one of those folks where nothing surprises me.
Really? Yeah, things are so crazy.
And the reason why I say that is because when you look at what happened with COVID-19 and the pandemic, we hadn't had a pandemic in 101 years. And that was kind of the thing that I tried to preach to our coaches when, you know, and our administrators too, when everyone was on edge. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And I said, listen, I don't know. And I had to be comfortable with saying I don't know because that was the God's honest truth. No one had lived through a pandemic before that had worked in collegiate athletics. We hadn't had one since,
1918.
1918. So just being open and honest with people and telling them, listen, I don't know what's going to happen. What I do know is that when these changes come down the pike, I'll make sure that they're communicated. I make sure that we're prepared for them and we try to address our needs as best as we can. And so the reason why I say nothing has surprised me yet is because those first 6 months,
it just was way out there.
My first 30 days, I started July 1st of 2020. July 27th, I announced we were canceling our fall season. July 28th, I was being interviewed by ESPN Milwaukee, asking me, why did we cancel our season? So I say that to say nothing surprises me is because I lived through that. And sitting in this chair now, you just have to be prepared for what comes. And sometimes it's clean up on aisle 4, some days. And you just have to, but that's what I like about the job. It's not redundant. It's not the same every day. And you just got to stay ready and stay prepared.
Right. If you stay ready, you don't have to get ready.
Exactly.
Which is excellent. The priorities, when you tell me what you know, right, about priorities, especially when you started in a position, there was a pandemic happening, but were everybody's priorities the same? Did the group that you report to, did they agree on these are priorities for our commissioner, for our conference at the current moment? Did they agree, or were there some things that you have to do your own prioritization because the priorities are different coming from different parties?
The priorities from my board were clear and they were all on the same page. And I think they were all on the same page because they had just gone through a hiring process. My predecessor Gary Carner, who did an amazing job being there for 24 years, he kind of gave everyone notice that he was retiring. So they had time to process, time to think about it, time to know what type of leader they wanted. So I think coming in the gate, everybody was on the same page. But then the pandemic hit, right? So you kind of shift gears. It kind of changes things. But our board was very clear on what they wanted. And at the end of the day, once the pandemic happened, everybody just wanted to play. That was the main priority. How do we return to competition safely? How do we maintain giving our student athletes a positive experience while still keeping them safe? And honestly, making sure that we had mental health services available for our student athletes, and for our coaches and our administrators.
Did you have to ramp that up during the pandemic?
We did. We had some programming where we had some mental health experts come in, and a lot of our institutions did the same thing because everybody was experiencing something different. Yeah. So yeah.
I think that's excellent. When you talk about effective communication, you talk about listening, are the needs, priorities, and wants of the CEOs in line with the needs, priorities, and wants of the student athletes when we talk about influence as a conference commissioner?
I believe so. We just went through this process. You've heard every division talk about it, this new constitution. And I think the student athletes made it perfectly clear that they want us to put a higher emphasis on mental health. And so I think that's something that our administrators have been paying attention to. It's something that we're going to have to pay attention to for years to come because now we have incoming students who are freshmen who lived through a pandemic as well. So their needs are going to be a little bit different from our current student athletes. And so this is something that we're going to have to continue to see it through. Unfortunately, we've had a lot of, nationally, we've had a lot of student athletes commit suicide. So I really think that the new Constitution shined the light on the importance of mental health with our student athletes. So, our campuses are tapped in. Our campus counselors, our administrators, our athletic trainers. I just got to give them a shout out because they have been amazing through the pandemic.
Right.
I mean, they're on the front lines of everything. They're not only, helping our student athletes through injuries, but usually they're the first ones to spot something that's going wrong with our student athletes from a mental health standpoint. So, yes, I would say all of our administrators are on the same page with our student athletes as far as addressing the mental health needs. Now, when we talk about resources, that's something completely different. We all know what needs to be done. It's just having the resources and the personnel in order to get it done. So
effective communication through listening, effective leadership through listening. Can you strategically plan for 3, 4, and 5 years as we come out the pandemic based on what you hear? Or like, how do you balance that as the leader, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need to strategically plan, but you also need to be concerned with what's important right now. So how do you balance that?
Absolutely. It's a challenge right now. If you just think of coming out of academic year 18-19, no one would have thought of a pandemic and inflation, right? So we're coming out of a pandemic. We're coming out of inflation. We're also hitting that enrollment cliff that everyone has talked about in 2026. I think COVID sped that up. So now from a higher education standpoint, we're thinking about resources. We're thinking about mental health. We're thinking about inflation. We're thinking about enrollment. And I think it's a challenge. So when you're looking at I don't think you can plan 5 to 7 years out right now.
How far do you look? Then?
I think it's 2 to 3.
2 to 3 years.
I think it's 2 to 3 years. And you reevaluate, you look 3 years and you reevaluate in 2.
Right.
To see.
Are we on the right path? You need to make some adjustments.
It's like that
right?
3-year contract with the second year option. You're going to opt in or you're going to opt out in that second year to say, do we need to pivot? Are things trending where we think they are? So I think you can really only plan 3 years max, really 2 years out. But that 5 to 7 year planning, that doesn't exist right now, in my opinion.
I know before we went into the pandemic, there was a concern across the nation about enrollment.
Mm-hmm.
I think Division III was hit with that a little bit too.
Mm-hmm.
Are those still a concern amongst the CEOs of the conference?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think when you look at the national birth rate, you look at the number of high school graduates, those numbers aren't increasing. We saw substantial numbers in the 90s with college enrollment. Now there are a lot more opportunities for young people, whether it's entrepreneurship, whether it's 2-year college, whether it's going to get a certificate, whether it's going to trade school. And I think higher education has to make the case for, a college degree. I believe in education. I wouldn't be here without my education, without, the value of the 2 degrees that I have currently. So now parents and students are starting to say, what's the return on my investment? And I think that we have to continuously make the case for why we are important and why it is needed. So that will be our challenge over the next 5 years, I believe.
And then athletics playing into that. Tell me about how athletics plays a significant part in expressing the importance of academics and college education.
Well, we see the retention rate with athletics. I know I can't speak for every campus, but I know with our 8 institutions, our GPAs from our student athletes are higher than the student body. Our retention, our graduation rates are higher than the student body. So I believe we've already proved our importance to to the higher education landscape. And I think that a lot of kids now, whether it's band, whether it's drama club, a lot of folks look for a place of belonging, and they want that team-like atmosphere. And I believe collegiate athletics provides that at its highest level. Our conference does it the best, but again, I really think that, we do a good job with providing that overall college experience with the high academics and the high athletic success we've had.
Yeah, which is excellent. I want to wrap with you summing up your philosophy in terms of listening for leadership again, so we can send that off as the educational point of this conversation. Tell me that one more time.
Listening and observing and connecting. Those are the three key things that I think are important in my job, and just tying those all together to help guide my institutions through their everyday needs that they have.
You probably take that with you wherever. It's not just there.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Excellent. Well, this has been an excellent conversation. I really appreciate you joining us here on the One Question Leadership Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, ma'am. That was Danielle Harris. She is the commissioner of the Wisconsin Intercollegiate Athletic Conference. And of course, this is Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of the One Question Leadership Podcast is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.